This is a podcast from DuncanCartlidgeOnline, the online resource for all construction professionals that's available 24/7. Don't forget to subscribe at the place you usually get your podcasts so as not to miss a thing. Hello again and welcome to another podcast from DuncanCartlidgeOnline. As usual, Barney, my Labrador, is here to give his stamp of approval on the proceedings. In this episode, we'll have a look at the revised JCT 24 suite, which is due for release in a few months, PFI, the long goodbye, and built environment degrees. Do they need a shake-up? So let's start with a look at the new JCT suite. In the summer of 2023, the JCT announced that 2024 would see a revised suite of contracts. However, if you're expecting anything dramatic, then you'll be disappointed. The headline change is modernization and appears to be the rewording of the contracts to eliminate the use of masculine pronouns, as the current suite always assumes contractors must be male. To be honest, I'm surprised that this has not been done previously. In addition, electronic notices, including payment notices, will be accepted, as well as the use of electronic signatures. Other changes include the addition of a new relevant event to clause 2.29 to add epidemics as a legitimate reason for contractors to apply for an extension of time. You may recall that in a previous podcast, I discussed extensions of time. Currently, the contract administrator has 12 weeks to consider a contractor's application for an interim extension of time, and I have always thought this was an extraordinary long time, but now this has been reduced to 8 weeks in the new suite. In addition, the provisions of clause 3.22 in regard to antiquities will be extended to include the discovery of ordnance, that's unexploded bombs to you and me, contamination and asbestos. Not unsurprisingly, alignment with recent legislation has also been carried out, notably the building regs, insolvency rules and the Construction Act. An interesting development is a shift in emphasis, making it mandatory, in line with the construction industry playbook, to promote collaborative working, sustainable development considerations, as well as notification of negotiation of disputes. Now, if you're not familiar with the construction playbook, here is a brief overview. The construction playbook was issued in December 2020 and is available online and was to be implemented by the end of 2023. It applies to all new public works, programs, and undertaken by central government departments and arm-length bodies on a comply or explain basis. You may have heard of the term arm's-length body recently during the Post Office inquiry. It seems to me that arm-length body is simply a device to limit government liability. The term playbook was adopted from American football coaching to describe all the plays and strategies available to a team, leaving it up to the players to select the most appropriate play. Aimed primarily at those within the public sector, it is hoped that the processes in the playbook will, in time, trickle down to the private sector. There is a move away from selection purely on lowest price and trying to ensure the contractors and subcontractors maintain sustainable profit margins. There is also strong emphasis on early supply chain involvement. However, for those hoping to find a silver bullet in the playbook, they will again be disappointed, as it proposes little that has not been proposed previously by numerous government initiatives. However, what is new is that previous initiatives are now incorporated into a single document. The playbook has its roots in the Carillion failure and subsequent supply chain fallout, and Boris Johnson's pledge to deliver better, greener and faster public works. There is a heavy emphasis on making more use of modern methods of construction, or MMC, but, as discussed in a previous podcast, MMC firms are having a tough time just now, with many companies entering receivership. There has been a general criticism of MMC policy lacks government direction. In January, a House of Lords inquiry criticised the government for undirected and non-strategic investment in modern methods of construction. Last week, Sheffield-based timber-framed volumetric specialist Lighthouse ceased tradings, with all 113 staff members losing their jobs following a failed attempt to sell the business. And finally, in our look at the new JCT suite, a brand new JCT contract covering target cost contracts will be added. And now a look at PFI. I've entitled this section, PFI, The Long Goodbye. Back in the 1990s, the only procurement strategy in town for the public sector was Design and Build and the Private Finance Initiative, or PFI. There was very little chance of getting a public sector project approved if it didn't adopt these models. PFI was particularly popular with politicians as it allowed the unitary charge payments of the PFI to be accounted for off balance sheet and not appear as a debt on UK PLC's accounts. PFI was finally ditched in 2018 following a lot of criticism, particularly from trades unions. Personally, I was a fan of PFI. It produced much-needed infrastructure at a time when many hospitals, for example, were Victorian monstrosities. Initially, PFI contracts were for 30 to 35 years and were very complex. In the coming years, many of the early contracts will be running out. Latterly, contracts were shorter with break clauses. Taking a PFI hospital as an example, for the last 30 years, the facilities management has been run by a private sector consortium. So, what happens when the contract runs out? The idea is that after the end of the contract, the facility is handed back in an appropriate condition to the public sector. But, according to a recent National Audit Office report, many authorities have little idea on the condition of the asset, and some say that it has been returned in a worse condition than expected. 4 out of 9 surveyed authorities by the NAO who took ownership of a PFI asset at expiry were not satisfied with the asset's condition. Many PFI projects are now within the handing back window, with around 78 projects expiring between 2021 and 2027. A small amount will run until 2054, so it's not that easy to say goodbye to PFI. Over the next 7 years in England, PFI assets with an estimated value of £3.9 billion will revert to public sector ownership. When the PFI was at its height in the 1990s, many public sector professionals jumped ship to join private sector consortia for more lucrative terms and conditions, leaving a dearth of expertise in the public sector. It follows that financially constrained authorities, presented with schools and other infrastructure, will now have to provide funding for routine FM, maintenance and running costs, as well as the operational expertise to keep the facility going. There is a very real risk of increased costs and service disruption if authorities do not prepare for contract expiry adequately in advance. The National Audit Office report suggests that an authority should start planning at least 7 years prior to a PFI contract ending. In reality, many may have no alternative other than to extend existing contracts. And now moving on to the final topic of this podcast, Do built environment degree courses need a revamp? As someone who has been involved in delivering degree programs in quantity surveying and commercial management, it often occurred to me that, given the built environment courses are vocational, many degrees are failing to capture the imagination of students, and courses have become all about, well, passing. Why on earth does a QS, for example, need to know about the characteristics of Portland cement, how to spot a nasty case of dry rot, or the crushing strength of bricks? This approach is not new. I recall when sitting the RICS QS exams having to pass a paper on structures, involving the calculation of the size of beams and columns. Just how dangerous is that? And what would that look like on your professional indemnity insurance quote? Are there not more relevant subjects a QS student could study? The upshot of this sort of material in the curriculum is that students turn off, especially during the early years of a degree, that don't contribute to the final degree classification. They take the attitude, I'll just get enough marks to pass, which in a lot of cases is 40%, which means in effect 60% is not studied in any depth. I have seen many students walk out of exams at the point where they judge they have done enough to pass. It's very rare to have more than a handful of students left in the exam room at pens down. In addition, absenteeism is high, with students just not turning up for lectures or even site visits they consider are not required to pass. Once assignments have been issued, typically halfway through a module, students don't turn up to lectures as they have all the information they need to tackle assignments and pass. It's the modules based on real-life practice and that attract positive feedback from students, as they are able to engage with the subject matter because the taught materials and the assessments reflect real work scenarios. What's the role of the professional institutions in all this? I think some of the professional bodies need to step up to the plate. In the last 10 years or so, the RICS in particular has seemed to operate a lighter and lighter touch when it comes to auditing accredited degree courses, relying on external examiner reports, whereas in contrast, the CIOB, and I can confirm this from personal experience, carry out a forensic examination of courses prior to accreditation or reaccreditation. Around 2003, the now University College of Estate Management started what was referred to at the time as a conversion course leading to an MSc in quantity surveying for holders of cognate and non-cognate degrees, giving a route through to a professional qualification. It was an immediate success, as it provided a painless route to obtaining a professional qualification by distance learning. It wasn't long before every university with a construction department was offering a similar course, as it was a financially good earner. For the RICS also, this was a welcome membership boost, as before long, students with master's degrees applying for RICS membership overtook students with first degrees. I just wonder whether students who take a fast-track MSc route, particularly from a non-cognate background, are missing out on a lot of the basics. In my experience, few of the academic staff are actively involved or wish to be involved in either professional or industry activity. Professorial posts seem to be handed out for the slimmest of reasons instead of being reserved for the great and the good. Can you imagine this being the case in medicine, for example? Today, the benchmark qualification for a humble lecturer wanting to get their foot in the door is a PhD, and many new entrants have little or no practical hands-on experience, and even fewer have an RICS or a CIOB qualification. The consequences of this is that staff on built environment courses may be highly qualified, but with little understanding of the construction or civil engineering industries. In contrast, the lecturers who taught me back in the day were all middle-aged professionals qualified with many years' experience. Boring, I know. Come on, get off the stage. It strikes me that education is drifting, and there needs to be, at the very least, a review of what is taught in built environment degrees. Admittedly, apprenticeships are excellent, but this route is for a minority at present. In conclusion, and before I take Barney for his walk, like me, you may have received the RICS All Professional Update for April. You know, the RICS seems to me a bit like the BBC, a top-heavy organisation enjoying a good life on a protected income stream. Same old boring format, a photograph of somebody or other, I don't know who he is. Perhaps the RICS should make Gary Lineker an honorary member like Phil Spencer. At least I'd recognise him. A leading article on the update section is, I'm sure, on a topic on everyone's lips, addressing the key issues in the built environment at MIPIN. In addition, a link to a Modus article caught my eye. Can the Church of England ease the housing shortage? From what I've heard, they're adding to it. If you can, have a look at the CIOB newsletter. Not a mention of MIPIN anywhere, just stuff people want to read. Well, rant over, and that's all for this episode. I hope you found it interesting. This has been a podcast from DuncanCartlidgeOnline. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe. From Barney and me, until next time, bye for now.